What if the most annoying thing about your favorite streaming show is actually their most profitable business strategy? Hi, what's up, everybody? So, I came across this article on Deadline by Mr. Max Goldbart. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, called The Stranger Things Effect. And it's basically an article where he talks about this company called Ampere Analysis, I believe is how you say it. And they noticed that there seems to be a widening gap between the end of one season and the beginning of a new season with a lot of different shows, and how it keeps getting bigger and bigger, especially over the last 5 years or so. And he calls it the Stranger Things effect because they're the most obvious culprit that does this, especially when you think of the end of season 4 and the beginning of season 5. I mean, there was a 2-year gap for when that happened. And even me, as a huge fan of Stranger Things, at some point I'm like, what the hell is going on? Okay, yes, they want to make every episode bigger and badder, but it's like 2 years is a long time to make your audience wait. But then I started thinking of, other shows that have been doing this, recently. And it's about like 12 to 16 months, like on average, of when the season ends and another season begins. And I just I've always thought about this and never understood it. And I remember even the last time this came up on my radar was the penultimate season of The Sopranos with the final season of The Sopranos. It was about a year and a half between the two, and that was unheard of at the time. Having said that, though, they did kind of give us some caveats, because it was like, okay, yes, you had to wait a long time, but we made some extra episodes, so I don't remember, I think it was maybe 13 episodes for an average season, and now there were 16, I mean maybe even 18 episodes of a season. So it's like, all right, at least we're getting rewarded for our patience, and it definitely paid off if you're a fan of The Sopranos. But that was a unique situation for the time. It used to be like a season of a show ended in late May-ish, mid-May, and then it'd be back the next season in September. So you'd only have a few months off, they called it hiatus, and then they would just, before the first initial writer's strike that I can remember, I think back in 2007, they would just show reruns of the previous season, so it would kind of stay in your universe a little bit, and kind of, always remind you of the things that happened in that season right before the new season started. This is, back in the day of terrestrial TV, you know what I mean? Now you could just binge watch everything. And then what the article is basically saying is that, no, this is an intentional strategy, that the streaming services are using. They're making you wait more and more and more, building that anticipation. And then at some point they would just boom with a marketing blitz for the upcoming season. And so all of a sudden the viewership goes up because you're rewatching the seasons leading up to the new one coming out. And also those people that really haven't caught on, haven't really paid attention to that particular show. I actually did meet a couple people before season 5 of Stranger Things that have never seen a single episode of it. And so they're like, okay, we'll watch it. So these streaming services are also banking on people like that, who are going to subscribe for the first time, watch the show from beginning to end, or at least up until that point, and then the viewership numbers are just going to explode for the new season coming up. I think for season 5, the viewership, in the article it says, I'll put a link to the article in the comment, in the caption, I think it went up like 300%, So they're getting this big boom of money before a season begins, and that's why they're like making you wait over and over again. It's like, before, I would always pontificate, why is this happening? What's going on here? And my initial theory was kind of twofold. First, I thought of the last writer's strike that happened, and one of the main points of contention during that writer's strike was that There's less episodes in a season. When I was growing up, a season of any show was 20 plus episodes, anywhere from like 22 to 26 episodes. And now it's shrunk, so like more than half. I mean, an average season for anything now is like 10 episodes. I even remember watching season 1 of The Punisher when it was back still on Netflix and thinking to myself, oh wow, 13 episodes. We're really getting something here. It's like 10, sometimes 8, maybe even 6 sometimes. And so you just need less writers in a room developing this. And so back in the day, there would be like somewhere in the teens, like 13, 14, 15 writers in a room, and then they would map out the entire season. X amount of people would be, divvied out the responsibility of this episode or this couple of episodes, and then that's how writers would, be gainfully employed. Now that they need less and less of this, it's like, now it's an issue. And so I was like, okay, so of course, it takes, it's like what, maybe 3-4 writers at this point for 10 episodes. It's going to take them some time, and then they need to like gestate on it so they can come up with the vision of the next season and all that. Yeah, it was none of that. It has everything to do with money, nothing to do with creativity. But as a famous philosopher, Rachel Zegler, once said, it's Hollywood, baby. Anyways, those are my thoughts. What about you guys? Let me know what you think in the comments below. Smash that like button, give me a follow, and I'll see you guys next time.